So let's dive a bit deeper into the stress response, our next subtopic. So stress and the stress response usually arise when our coping ability is less than what the demands of the situation or task require, especially when this imbalance between one's coping ability and the task demands are perceived by the person as a threat to their well-being. And as mentioned in the earlier slide on the signs of stress, we may show many signs of stress related to our body, our behavior, our feelings, and our thoughts. So what actually happens in the immediate stages of our response to stress is the body's reaction to the situation or stressor, which is A, outside of our control, and B, generally short-lived. So what specifically happens, you see here on the slide, when an event is identified as a threat, a small region at the base of the brain will set off an alarm response. For example, when you hear a loud sudden noise or something like this. And that will cause hormones to be released, meaning the system causes the release of adrenaline and cortisol from the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. This then will result in increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, increased blood sugar, which also gives us an energy boost, and other functions that are not needed for fight or flight are stopped. For example, digestion. But as mentioned earlier, our immediate reaction to the stressor is followed or accompanied by our behavioral response, which is guided by our perception of the situation as threatening or not. That is, how we perceive the situation will determine our behavior in such situations. So, for example, is the sudden noise truly threatening? Most of the time it is not. And so we can return to what we did before this loud sudden noise occurred. So what this all means is that our perception of an event plays a large part in our stress response, meaning that the potential stressor, in combination with one's personal perception of it, will influence our stress response. And therefore, what is stressful to one person may not be stressful to another, because our perception is involved in the stress response. You see example 1 here on the slide, being cut off in traffic. So if one perceives this event as deliberate, the result is likely an upheaval of negative emotions, such as high stress and high anger. But if one perceives this event as unintentional, the result is lower stress. And very similarly, looking at our example 2 here, our perception of a skydiving experience can be perceived either way, and accordingly can result in positive emotions or in a sense of terror and fear, which of course then would be accompanied by a stress response. So let's continue on then to our next subtopic, which is modern day stressors. So normally after the stress reaction, what we know as or call the fight or flight response, sometimes the freeze response, our nervous system restores our body back to normal levels, resulting in a decrease of cortisol and adrenaline, which are returned to back to base levels. So to make this very clear, when we are in immediate physical danger, stress serves a purpose. It keeps us safe. But such situations are generally not ongoing. That is, after the body's immediate stress response, everything, including those stress hormones, go back to baseline. In contrast, modern day stressors, our bodies do not easily return to baseline because these stressors are generally and often ongoing. And examples of modern day stressors you see here on the slide, and those include financial pressures like managing income, bills and taxes, health concerns, dealing with injuries, medical issues and health uncertainties, family dynamics, like navigating relationships and family responsibilities can be stressful. Workplace challenges like job satisfaction, security, and work-life balance can increase our sense of stress. Housing worries certainly can be a stressor, like addressing rent, repairs, and the need for relocation or moving. Transportation issues are on the list of stressors, like coping with traffic and travel difficulties. And last but not least, global concerns, stress from politics, climate change, and pandemics. All of these can be potential stressors. So in this slide, we compare the normal stress response that occurs due to threats to one's immediate physical safety and contrast it with our body's response to modern day stressors. So physical threats to safety. The stress response is an adaptive mechanism that prepares us to deal with genuine threats. And so, for example, when confronted by a predator, our bodies undergo physical changes, as explained earlier. These changes will enable us to fight, flee, or hide, ultimately helping us to survive via initiating the fight or flight or freeze response. And once that threat is gone, our body will return to a state of balance. Now looking at the modern day stressors, in contrast here, those modern day stressors often do not pose a real safety threat. However, our body will still react to any perceived threat with a threat response, even when there is no need to fight or flee. So these modern day stressors can be long-lasting, leading to chronic stress without the opportunity for recovery, for which reason it is so important to manage the stress in our daily lives. So to summarize why it is so important to manage our stress, if we are constantly under stress, it can affect many of our body systems. And this will create wear and tear on the body, like driving a car at high speeds for a long time. This wear and tear due to ongoing stress increases the risk for health conditions, such as high blood pressure or stomach problems or other health problems. And keep in mind, we and our bodies are not designed to be under stress for long periods of time. Also important here, stress is not a diagnosis. So physicians are limited in their ability to treat stress itself. They can only treat the symptoms or results of stress, like depression or anxiety. What that means is that we ourselves need to manage our stress. So let's have then a look at what we can do to manage our stress in our last subsection of this class, stress management. So in this model, you see that we can, 1, minimize the stressors in our lives, 2, cope with the stressors that we experience, and 3, utilize relaxation techniques. So most stress management programs actually start with step number 3, deep breathing and relaxation. These techniques are obviously very helpful, but if we skip step number 1 and 2, we might forget to try to actively deal with the problems or even bypass the idea that we can avoid a specific stressor altogether. So step number 1, how do we minimize stressors? Well, first of all, completely stress-free life is not possible. Most people do not have new or unexpected stressors on a daily basis. Instead, most of us experience many of the same or similar stressors every day. And that is important because if a stressor is predictable, it is more likely to be controllable. That means it's more likely that we can do something about it. So an example of minimizing a stressor is to prioritize tasks and consciously schedule enough time for a task to decrease the potential for time pressure, which can then create stress. In step number 2, we look at how we can cope with the stressors. So to cope is to deal with the struggles and the difficulties in our lives. And those are usually and often predictable stressors that we face. Coping usually involves adjusting or tolerating. Okay, well, we do this slide. In step 2, we look at how we can cope with stressors. So to cope is to deal with the struggles and the difficulties in life. With the usual and often predictable stressors that we face. So coping usually involves adjusting to or tolerating negative events or realities, and we can do so by adjusting and by developing strategies. That can include being proactive about potentially stressful situations, such as avoiding traffic by leaving early or allowing enough time, like when we want to explore a new route. But keep in mind, while we can structure our lives to limit the number of stressors, we will still face stress because stress is pretty ubiquitous, meaning it's part of our daily lives. So for example, even though one leaves early to avoid traffic, unexpected things can happen. Something like new construction or a flat tire. And when such things happen, we want to engage in solution seeking and addressing the immediate problem if able. In our example, for example, the traffic or running into construction, that can make, okay, how we do that slide? A third time. So in step 2, we look at how we can cope with stressors. To cope is to deal with struggles and difficulties in life. our usual and often predictable stressors that we face. Coping usually involves adjusting to or tolerating negative events or realities, and we can do so by adjusting and developing strategies. That can include being proactive about potentially stressful situations, such as avoiding traffic by leaving early or allowing enough time when exploring a new route. But keep in mind, while we can structure our lives to limit the number of stressors, we will still face stress. So for example, even when one leaves early to avoid traffic, unexpected things may happen, like new construction or a flat tire. When such things happen, we want to engage in problem solving and solution seeking and address the immediate problem as we are able to. In our example of traffic or running into construction, that can mean taking a different route or detour if that is possible. And for a flat tire, a few solutions are available. That is change the tire or calling a tow truck. And if you can't move at all, you can call in to report that you'll be late. And step number 3 in our stress management model involves the use of relaxation. Relaxation is the opposite of tension, and many different shorter and longer techniques are available for all types of domains, situations, and challenges. So practicing the use of relaxation can help our body and mind to return to a non-stressed state. And on this slide here, you also see some examples of relaxation techniques, which are deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation, and guided imagery. Another technique to support relaxation is distraction. So if a stressor is ongoing and outside of one's control, meaning we cannot minimize it by using strategies to deal with the problem, we can actually utilize distraction in order to return to a non-stressed state. And we want to do that because a stressor, if it's ongoing and outside of our control, it can take our attention and thereby lead to worry. And under such circumstances, practicing distraction techniques can help with taking attention away from the stressor and thereby help you to return to or maintain a relaxed state. Examples include listening to music, watching a movie, reading a book, doing a puzzle, socializing and laughing with friends, playing with children or pets, or starting a new hobby. So there are many, many options that we have to help us to distract ourselves from a stressor that is ongoing and outside of our control. And of course, what you want to utilize is, nope, restart that. Sorry, guys. So another technique to support relaxation is distraction. If a stressor is ongoing and outside our control, it can take our attention and lead to worry. Under such circumstances, practicing distraction techniques can help with taking attention away from the stressor and thereby help you to return to or maintain a relaxed state. Examples include listening to music, watching a movie, reading a book, doing a puzzle, socializing and laughing with friends, or playing with children or pets, or starting a new hobby. And of course, Utilize what works for you and in the specific situation, meaning you can incorporate any or all of these options. So here on the slide, starting at the lighter purple piece of the option pie and going clockwise around, we can use relaxation and deep breathing techniques. We can seek support from friends and family. We can do fun activities like listening to music or spending time in nature, going for a walk. We can engage with and stay in the present and prioritize what is most important in the here and now. We also can and want to utilize strategies such as lists, plans, and schedules to stay organized and build routine. And last but not least, engaging in self-care, which includes paying attention to your needs, such as healthy nutrition, physical and mental exercises, or massages. But at the same time, these ideas will only work if you actually use them. And of course, we are here to help. So please speak with your team if you need more ideas or help with stress management. And this brings us to the end of our stress management class. Thank you for listening and see you in our next education class. Goodbye.